My father took care of me every day. He would take me to breakfast every morning and then to the country club. My mom ran the businesses. They were entrepreneurs. We owned toy stores and craft stores and restaurants and seafood chains. And
my dad was more of my caretaker. He came from a very well-to-do family. My parents owned businesses, Playland toy stores, that later became like KB toy stores. And so my mom was the worker. She was the real worker. So every day when my dad wasn't out of town, he would take me to breakfast and we'd draw smiley faces on that pancake.
I came from a real wealthy family. I'll just give you a little bit of my testimony. My great-grandfather had pioneered electricity, so I grew up on my father's side who had committed suicide in wealth. We didn't know what it was to be poor. When my dad committed suicide, that side of the family totally cut us off when we went from extreme wealth to extreme poverty. So the authenticity of me is literally knowing what it is to go from mansions not to having food the next day to eat.
let me give you a story real quick. My father committed suicide when I was 5 years old. When he committed suicide, we came from a pretty well-to-do family, and we went into extreme poverty. So I went from eating out and nice houses and clothes and all the comforts that you don't even understand when you're 5 years old to suddenly, I didn't know if I'd have a meal at night. I had 2 dresses that year. I didn't have back-to-school supplies.
My first memory of money was we went from wealth when I was a young girl. I mean, my parents owned toy stores, Playland toy stores, so I would go in, my dad would go get the deposit every week or every day, and I would go with them, and I'd usually walk in and grab something from off the shelf, and my mom would make me put it back, and my dad would say, you can have it, you can have anything you want. And my dad just spoiled me. He gave me anything that I wanted. And so I thought that just, we lived this pretty lavish lifestyle. I was born into a pretty well-to-do family. When my dad died, our socioeconomic status changed drastically, and we couldn't literally eat. I was telling them 2 days ago when I'm sitting around there doing branding sessions and all, and I just started crying. I said, that fast I can go back and remember what it's like being in first grade and Miss Shelby spanking me because I wet myself, people making fun of me, and I wouldn't have anything to eat because I only had 2 outfits for all the first grade. I can remember sitting in class with my stomach just hurting because I would have to sit, and if I got to split a spaghetti plate with my brother every 2 days, then I was doing well. And we'd gone from this lavish lifestyle to that.
Didn't you have a brief marriage also?
I did. Now, that was before I'd gotten saved or had an encounter with God. And what had happened was my son, whose birthday is today, I had gotten pregnant and decided, make this what people might have thought as a wrong, of course, one of my greatest gifts in life, right? And so very brief at 18 years old. And I don't mean to kind of laugh at that or take it light.
Randy White.
I really feel poised and positioned to carry forth what I've known since I was 18 years old. I didn't grow up in church, never heard the gospel until I was 18, had a life-defining moment, and God literally took me in a vision, showed me multitude and masses of millions of people, nations, and he said every time my mouth was open, there would be a manifestation of his presence.
Wow.
And when it shut, people fell into utter darkness. Because the Lord took me in a vision and a trance when I'm 18 years old. And from that time I'm 18 years old when God showed me that every time my mouth opens, there are multitudes and masses of people getting saved. They're getting delivered, they're getting healed. When I shut my mouth, they fall into utter darkness. I've always said I had a vision, which I did, but I'll go into detail. In fact, this is the first time I've ever publicly told it. I've always said I had a vision, and every time I opened my mouth, that
there were masses of people getting saved, delivered, healed, etc. When I shut my mouth, which is what the fight's about, see, because God showed me from the time I was 18 that they'd fall into utter darkness. But what literally happened to me was God took me in a trance, and I saw my body lying there. And God took me in the spirit to different nations, and I stood on soil, and I saw seas of people, masses of people. And I saw a move of the Spirit of God. I'd see a glory cloud. And there was different manifestations. Some would be healed, some would be delivered, some were weeping, some were rejoicing. It's all different moves of the Spirit. And that's when God called me into ministry. He literally took me into my future and put me back into my body. And God, I haven't even ever shared that. So as I went through life, here I am, 18 years old, God calls me into ministry, and he shows me, I'm going to use you to shake nations.
If God says I can take what they call trailer trash and a messed up Mississippi girl that made decisions, come on, that by choice, nobody forced me to get in a bed. I chose it. Oh, come on, everybody. Nobody held a gun to my head and said, you got to sleep with me and I'm going to get you pregnant when you're 18 years old. See, somebody going, oh my goodness, I can't believe you just said that. But then 2 weeks after that, I got saved. And when I was saved 2 years into my salvation, I was in the Word and God called me. So when I'm 18 years old, come on, not all my decisions, and still some of my decisions need some help in Jesus' name. I made a decision. Come on, help me out. Nobody made me jump in bed and have sex. Why y'all gonna? Nobody made me do that. Because I had an empty love tank, I thought if I had sex with you, that means you love me. And because of that, no one held a gun to my head, Dr. Payne. No one said, if you don't do this, if you don't get in bed with me, then I'm going to kill you. No, I chose to. And then I got pregnant out of wedlock. And then I got saved 2 weeks later. And then I had this baby. And then I get this call God of my life. You don't think that God knew that I was...
Didn't you have a brief marriage also?
I did. Now, that was before I'd gotten saved or an encounter with God. And what had happened was my son, whose birthday is today, I had gotten pregnant and decided, make this what people might have thought as a wrong. Of course, one of my greatest gifts in life, right? And so very brief at 18 years old. And I don't mean to kind of laugh at that or take it light.
Randy White.
I said to Brad last night, he came in, I was teasing with him. I had on my jeans, so don't get all upset. I lifted right here and I said, that's you, boy. I said, those scars are from you. You made me get big and fat. I gained 100 pounds with you. So I started pushing you and you got stuck, boy. And when you did, you fractured my hip. And you broke me. Because they said I was too small to bring something this big into the world. But they didn't know who they said that to. They didn't know who they were talking to. They thought they were just talking to a young 19-year-old girl that didn't have insurance and they looked at her a little poor. They didn't know that they were talking to a woman of destiny that had God on her side, living in a trailer with no money, but a big old purpose. that everybody else said God will never use you. You had a child out of wedlock. You went through a divorce when you were 19 years old. You were sexually and physically abused. You never heard the word of God until you were 18. Your daddy committed suicide.
Didn't you have a brief marriage also?
I did. Now, that was before I'd gotten saved or had an encounter with God. And what had happened was my son, whose birthday is today, I had gotten pregnant and decided, make this what people might have thought as a wrong. Of course, one of my greatest gifts in life, right? And so very brief at 18 years old. And I don't mean to kind of laugh at that or take it light.
Randy White.
That everybody else said God will never use you. You had a child out of wedlock. You went through a divorce when you were 19 years old. You had a child out of wedlock. You went through a divorce when you were 19 years old.
I was an 18-year-old, 19-year-old girl. I'd gotten pregnant with Brad. I got saved. And I can tell you what I was wearing. I was actually pregnant. And I had on a blue maternity dress. That's over 200 pounds. You were only 10 pounds. Gained over 100 pounds with him. And I had on a blue dress with white little flowers on it. And a pastor preached and said 94% of people will never win somebody to the Lord. And I went to an altar. And I said, God, if you can use anything, will you use me? But I stayed at that altar, Brad, till about 6 a.m. the next morning. And God put his heart in me that night. And I woke up, got up. And I was never the same. You got to forgive me because it's as fresh to me right now as it was 28 years ago.
Didn't you have a brief marriage also?
I did. Now, that was before I'd gotten saved or had an encounter with God. And what had happened was my son, whose birthday is today, I had gotten pregnant and decided, make this what people might have thought as a wrong. Of course, one of my greatest gifts in life, right? And so very brief at 18 years old. And I don't mean to kind of laugh at that or take it light.
Randy White.
You had a child out of wedlock. You went through a divorce when you were 19 years old.